The second hand ticked loudly on the clock above the chalkboard, louder than the murmurs that rippled across the room. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the sun slipped lazily through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the desks. Mrs. Carter stood at the front of her classroom, 48 years old, glasses perched firmly on her nose, a stack of freshly graded assignments in her hands. She had been teaching for over 2 decades. She had seen shy children grow into leaders, and troubled kids rise above the darkness that once defined them. But she had also seen the other kind, the ones who mistook cruelty for confidence, disrespect for independence. Jason was one of those students. 17, tall, broad-shouldered, and full of unchecked arrogance. He lounged in the back row like the classroom was his personal stage. His leather jacket creaked as he leaned back, tapping his pencil against the desk to the rhythm of his own defiance. His friends laughed at every eye roll, every muttered insult he slipped under his breath. Mrs. Carter cleared her throat, her voice calm, steady. "Settle down, class. Let's begin." But Jason wasn't ready to listen. "You think you can boss me around just because you've been standing up there for 20 years? He sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're just a teacher." The room fell silent. His words hung heavy in the air, bouncing off the walls. Mrs. Carter looked at him, her eyes sharp but unwavering. "Respect isn't about who's in charge, Jason," she said evenly. "It's about who you choose to be." A few students shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided her gaze, afraid of what might happen next. But Jason smirked, leaning forward in his chair. To him, this wasn't a classroom anymore. It was a battlefield, and he wanted to win. The scrape of Jason's chair against the tile cut through the silence like a knife. He stood, his fists tight, his jaw locked. Each step toward the front of the classroom echoed louder than the last. His friends held their breath, eyes darting nervously toward the teacher. Mrs. Carter stayed still. She had faced storms before, but this storm had a human face, a boy who didn't yet understand the weight of his own choices. Jason stopped in front of her, his eyes blazing with defiance. Then, in a flash of uncontrolled anger, his hand swung out. The sound of the slap cracked through the room. Her glasses tumbled to the floor. A red mark bloomed across her cheek. Gasps erupted from every corner. One girl screamed, another covered her mouth in shock. Even Jason's closest friend sat frozen, stunned by the line he had just crossed. Mrs. Carter staggered but did not fall. She bent slowly, picking up her glasses with deliberate care, her movements calm, almost graceful. As she stood back up, she adjusted them on her nose, her face composed. The entire class held its breath. Everyone expected rage. They expected her to scream, to crumble, to call for help. But instead, she looked Jason straight in the eyes and spoke, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You just proved something to everyone here," she said, her tone steady as stone. "You think strength comes from hurting someone who can't fight back. But strength isn't violence. It's restraint. It's character. And right now, you've shown none." Jason blinked. For the first time, the weight of her words seemed heavier than his own fist. His friends shifted uncomfortably, shame crawling across their faces. The boy who had seemed untouchable now looked uncertain. Smaller. But the silence did not stay empty for long. From the far corner, a quiet voice rose. Daniel, a boy who rarely spoke, who was often overlooked, stood up. His voice carried across the stunned room. "She's right," he said. "My brother's in the army. He told me once, real men protect. They don't harm. What you did, that's not strength. That's weakness." The ripple effect was instant. Other students nodded. Some who once laughed at Jason's defiance now turned their eyes toward Mrs. Carter with newfound respect. The tide of the room had shifted. Jason, once the center of attention, now stood isolated in his shame. The weight of the moment pressed down like a stone. Jason's hand, the same hand he had used to strike, trembled at his side. His smirk had vanished. His confidence shattered. Mrs. Carter stepped closer, her presence radiating quiet authority. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You wanted to show power, Jason," she said softly, but every word cut sharp. "But today, you only showed weakness. And the only lesson anyone will remember is mine." Jason's face burned red, his jaw quivering, but he said nothing. His friends, once loyal shadows, couldn't meet his eyes. They looked down, ashamed, as if afraid of what they had become by following him. The classroom was silent until the bell rang, its shrill cry a reminder that life outside these walls would go on, but inside this room, something irreversible had happened. No one moved. No one dared to stand until Mrs. Carter gathered her books, adjusted her blouse, and walked with measured steps toward the door. The red mark on her cheek was visible, but she carried it with dignity, not shame. Jason sank back into his seat, no longer the king of the room. Just a boy who had made a choice he could never take back. As she left the classroom, Mrs. Carter wasn't just a teacher anymore. She was a living lesson. A woman who refused to be broken, who proved that true authority comes not from fear, but from respect. And though the textbooks on her desk spoke of history, mathematics, and literature, that day, the greatest lesson anyone learned in her classroom was one they would never forget. Backhand index pointing right, true strength is not in fists. Backhand index pointing right, true strength is not in fear. Backhand index pointing right, true strength is in honor, respect, and the courage to stand tall when someone tries to tear you down. And when she closed the door behind her, the students inside sat in stunned silence, knowing they had just witnessed a lesson that would outlast every chapter they would ever study. Respect is not demanded. It is earned. And sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who never raise their hand in violence, but stand tall in dignity when struck by it.